Silksong is a wake-up call. One of the most anticipated games of all time, a follow-up to one of the most beloved indie titles of all time. A game developed by just 3 people. Instead of these guys just running in to go cash the next check, they took their time. They poured their soul into it. And instead of them trying to squeeze the players for all they're worth, they turn around and they charge them $20 for it. Imagine that. What they would then deliver is something that is not only content-rich, but is nothing short of a masterpiece. I always try to find at least one word to put to some of these games, and for Silksong, it's ethereal. I can't quite put my finger on it. It's just out of grasp for whatever reason. There's so many elements that are singing together in perfect harmony, and the game is so beautiful and haunting and delicate, yet hard as nails, but more than anything, it's just fun. That's a lot of value, especially for that price. And in most cases, we'd be celebrating it, but right now, we have developers, journalists, analysts that are gaslighting the developers of the game, making them feel like they need to be responsible for the rest of the industry, saying that they should have given them more time. They should have given them heads up. They should have given them early access. Oh, and by the way, you're charging too little for that game. It's setting the wrong standard for the rest of us. They owe you nothing. It goes to show just how little we matter as customers in this industry, just how entitled and fragile this industry has become, because they have completely forgotten that the only relationship that matters is the one between the customer and the developer. Everything else is an afterthought. Today, what I want to do is I want to talk about the success of Silksong. I want to talk about my experience playing the game. I want to talk about how it set the industry on fire and why developers, for whatever reason, can't see what this game is doing for them because they can't see past themselves. Silksong has always been something of a myth, a game that people hoped would release, but as the years drug on, many of us questioned if it even existed at all. It became the GTA 6 or the Bloodborne 2 of the indie game scene, a name that people would chant at every showcase, half joking, but mostly half praying. The first game, Hollow Knight, was developed by a core team of just 3 people, and it released in 2017. This game was an instant hit. Its haunting world, hand-drawn art, and soundtrack spread like wildfire, selling almost 3 million units in the first 2 years, so it was no surprise when 2 years later, Team Cherry announced that they were already working on a sequel. In 2019, they dropped a trailer and a developer diary revealing that Silksong had started as a DLC before evolving into a full-blown standalone title, and then after that, silence. 7 years of it. Occasionally, you'd hear a sighting of Team Cherry at a conference, but there was nothing concrete. Without that, though, the hype never died. In fact, it actually just spurred the success of the original, pushing it to sell another 12 million units over the course of 7 years. Finally, in early 2025, during the Nintendo Direct for the Switch 2, it appeared just out of nowhere. Just a few seconds of footage dropped in the middle of a bunch of other trailers without any fanfare or any words or any announcement whatsoever, with a release window that said it was coming later this year. Months of speculation then followed, but then at Gamescom, Team Cherry made it official. Silksong was launching on September 4th, just 2 weeks away. In the 2 weeks leading up to Silksong's launch, Hollow Knight exploded on Steam. It shattered its old concurrent player record of 20,000 players, surging up to nearly 100,000 players as fans prep for the sequel. And then when Silksong finally released, it blew past everything. Over 500,000 concurrent players at launch, peaking at 587,000 players. The demand was so massive that it did something that I've never seen before. It broke the industry. Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, Steam, nearly every digital store buckled under the weight of people trying to download the game. Gamealytics has already estimated that the game has sold 2.7 million copies on Steam alone, and with consoles included, it's entirely possible that this game has already sold over 5 million copies in just the first week. I have not been able to pull myself away from this game, which is insane because it dropped right in the middle of a Helldivers 2 update, Path of Exile 2 content, and a flood of other releases, but Silksong just has that pull. There are very few games at launch where you can feel the passion of the developers baked into every detail. What is the best way I can describe this? Maybe you guys are going to be able to understand this. It's like walking into one of those historical houses that are like hundreds of years old. You can smell the wood. You can see the wear on the floors. You can feel the history pressed into every corner. You can see the souls that walk these halls. Silksong feels that way. It feels like these developers didn't just make a game. They are the game. I get lost in all of the backgrounds, caught in the tiny details, captivated by the dialogue. I've even died to bosses because I was so distracted to listening to the music that they had in the background. That's how good this game is. The game makes you feel so small and makes the world feel so endless, from the rotting docks to the volcanic forges to the moss-covered caverns. It's just a feast for the eyes. Anytime that I argue that fidelity doesn't matter or it doesn't even compare to artistry, this is the example I'm going to use. This is what I want to see. I love games that don't force you down a narrow path. If you want to chase the narrative, you can. If you'd rather just lose yourself in the gameplay, that works too. At first, I was zipping through dialogue. I just wanted to fight, explore, and move around. And then something shifted. Maybe it's because I got a lesson taught to me by some of the bosses. Maybe it was just a freedom of exploration kind of getting to me and slowing me down a little bit. But I slowed down as a result. I began listening to every character, reading every note, piecing together everything in the world, not just for lore, but for my own survival. NPCs were giving me hints, quests, upgrades, secrets. Everything felt like it was perfectly intertwined. Now, I've seen the complaints about difficulty and balance. Personally, I haven't had much of an issue with it. Don't get me wrong, the game is definitely brutal. I've died more times than I can count, but I never felt stuck. There wasn't a boss that made me feel like I couldn't beat it for whatever reason. If I ever hit a wall, I just assumed that I was missing a skill or an upgrade. I'd go searching, and sure enough, I'd be able to find what I was looking for. The combat just feels so good in your hands. You can't help but want to keep fighting things. And the only thing that ever really threw me off early in the game was being able to pogo off enemy attacks because all of your attacks were diagonal from the air. But once I found the Wanderer's Crest, I could use the classic Hollow Knight moveset, and then after that, it all clicked. But man, the sheer amount of content here is just insane. The bosses, secrets, branching paths, upgrades, character builds, it just doesn't stop. People say that the game will take you about 15 hours to beat, and I've heard that there's a whole extra area that you can find if you complete all of the quests. For me, it's probably going to take me closer to 30 hours because I've been sipping this game like a fine wine, appreciating every minute of it. And that's what blows my mind. A game this anticipated, this content rich, living up to expectations, and it's only $20. What a slap in the face of an industry that's been begging for games to go to $100 or more. And while we may be lost in a beautiful game, the rest of the industry has proceeded to lose its damn mind. Some of the first articles that I saw about the game before its release weren't even celebrating its arrival. It was games journalists that were whining that Team Cherry didn't hand out review copies. The gamer actually wrote, "It's an extremely short period between release date reveal and launch." And one of my first thoughts upon seeing the release date was, what about the poor critics that will have to cram it to get their reviews out on time? Jason Schreier actually talked about how he spoke with Team Cherry, and they told him flat out that they didn't give out review copies because they felt it would be unfair for critics to be able to play the game before Kickstarters. Remember that this game was on Kickstarter, funded by fans before Hollow Knight ever became a phenomenon that it is today. And how did the people respond to that? Well, they responded with lines like, "I hope it was more than this." Because not giving reviewers codes because it would be unfair sounds like a weird reason to me. Excuse me? No. You know what's weird? Weird is Games Press thinking that developers owe them anything at all. What's weird is pretending like their deadlines and reviews matter more than the people who actually paid for these games to exist. The only people that Team Cherry owes are their fans, the people who actually backed them before anybody knew who they were, the players who kept the flame alive for 7 years, the players who are actually buying the game right now. And yet here comes the media clutching their pearls, crying that they weren't given any special treatment, as if their suffering is having to play the same game as everyone else at the same time as everyone else. Imagine the arrogance it takes to be able to frame that as some kind of injustice. I am so done with this entitlement. Critics did not sell 15 million copies of Hollow Knight. Critics did not keep the Silksong hype alive when it was silent for 7 years. Players did that. Fans did that. The community did that. And the fact that the media still has the gall to act like they're the priority in this situation is exactly why nobody trusts them anymore. Now, if you guys thought that the entitlement would stop with review copies, well, you'd be wrong, because whether it's indie or AAA, there's been a full-on meltdown over the short window between the announcement and release and the fact that the game only cost $20. Developers have actually claimed that Team Cherry has a responsibility to warn other indies so they could get out of their way, and that pricing Silksong at $20 sets an unfair standard for everyone else. One sympathizer on Blue Sky wrote, "Team Cherry absolutely had a responsibility of giving a heads up about the release of Silksong, accommodating other indie developers in regards to it. Art isn't made in a vacuum, and as indie devs, they absolutely should know how hard it is for other indies to be visible." Another indie developer tweeted out, "As an indie dev making a smaller Metroidvania than Silksong, which I originally had thought would be fairly priced at $20, what should I price it at now? It'll be 10 to 15 hours of game, but it was made by one person with limited dev time and funds. I can't afford to give it away for free." This tweet caused a storm of articles and responses from other developers. One response read, "This is a fair statement, and quite honestly, Team Cherry does a disservice to the industry and other developers pricing Silksong so low. The level of work, craftsmanship, years, and you only charge $20? I get being pro-consumer, but it would be infuriating to peers." Another would take things even further on Blue Sky, saying that Silksong should have cost $40, and I'm not even joking. I won't go as far to say that it's a bad thing that it doesn't, but it will have effects, and not all of those effects will be good. Like, I personally am glad that it's so cheap. For me, it makes picking it up a no-brainer. The problem is that the gamer is a creature that is very bad at knowing why things cost what they do. God, how many times do we have to hear this? Millions of people will probably buy Silksong on day one, and it was a game that had a very low budget because the budget is these developers worked on it without direct pay for however long that they wanted to. It had these developers are independently wealthy budget of effectively $0. All this industry does is coddle one another's fragility, excuse every failure as somebody else's fault, and twist accountability into something that is optional. Team Cherry has no responsibility to anyone other than the people that are buying their game, and it's telling how many of these people cannot see past themselves to realize that's exactly why Silksong is so successful. What utopia do you live in where you think they have the responsibility of safeguarding the entire indie industry? How far gone do you have to be to twist them into the independently rich villain with some unfair advantage just because their last game was successful? And man, does it say everything when you would rather insult the players as the gamers that are undereducated, unrealistic, and ignorant of the process and the money instead of just admitting the truth. I can't believe the sheer lack of self-awareness from these people, especially the guy that comes forward and says that I'm personally glad that the game is $20. It makes it a no-brainer for me to pick it up, but it's still a bad thing. It's going to have a ton of bad effects. How do you not realize that's the point? How do you not see that their intent is to make sure that they're not gatekeeping their audience based on the price of the game? That's the reason why the game has regional pricing in some areas. It's like $10 to $2 in some countries. It's not generosity, it's smart business. The more people that have access to the game, the bigger the audience you have for it, the more people that are talking about it, the more people then come and buy the game, and then so on and so on. These guys don't even understand how business works. This industry has become so self-obsessed and so narcissistic that we don't even register to them anymore. We're not even a part of the conversation. We aren't even acknowledged until one of the guys steps forward and says, well, I understand wanting to be pro-consumer, but this must be infuriating for your peers. Yeah, probably, because they're losing. That's competition. Iron sharpens iron. Team Cherry does not make the industry better by building a pillow fort. They do it by leading by example, and we need more of that in this industry. Why aren't you celebrating this game? They kept their stakes low in development. They kept their budget low. They took their time. They optimized the game. They finished it, and then they sold it for a fair price. It is none of your business what they do. None. You have no say in it. And you shouldn't be Karen finger-wagging at them for being fair in the first place. If these customers see the quality of this game and the price of that game, and they say, this is the standard now, you jump. You don't have a choice in that. People keep trying to treat this like it's just an art. These are consumer products. What are you guys doing? If customers are going to look at this game, they're going to treat it the exact same way as they did Baldur's Gate 3. Anytime there is a conversation around a AAA game that failed to meet expectations, that was poorly positioned or poorly priced, Baldur's Gate 3 gets dragged into that conversation. If you fail, that is your fault. The customers have made their place clear. That's the thing that frustrates me the most with this, though, is because this entire conversation, these people are just so desperate to be a victim that they don't even realize that their villain is actually the hero. I think it's genuinely sad to see how so many people are fixated on how something can hurt them that they never stop to consider how it might actually benefit them. Take the price, for example. So many of these developers are panicked over a standard that a $20 Silksong sets, but they never stop to acknowledge the upside of it. By charging $20, Team Cherry has now made it possible for players to actually afford other games too. If Silksong had launched at a higher price, especially in the middle of a global cost of living crisis, players probably still would have bought it, but it likely would have been the only game that they bought that month. That's why we see so many of these AAA launches cannibalize each other. When 3 or 4 $70 titles hit in the same window, sales are muted across the board, not because players don't care, but because $210 or $280 in a single month is simply out of the reach for most people. I don't understand how these companies don't realize that pricing your games fairly, keeping them affordable, you're not just selling your own games, you're also keeping the entire ecosystem alive. You're giving players the freedom to be able to pick up Silksong and another indie title, or Silksong and a big AAA release, instead of forcing them into these one or the other decisions. That's creating more momentum, more conversation, and more sales that are happening in rapid succession across the entire industry. The minute that you push that price higher, you change how people are buying things. Suddenly, it's not an impulse anymore, it's a debate. Do I buy now? Do I wait? Do I skip it entirely? That hesitation kills momentum. It slows everything down, and it's not just bad for the players, it's bad for every developer. Beyond that, and I've said this many times before, pricing is a service issue. If the game is in high demand, but the service is poor and the games are overpriced, players are going to find another way to get what they want, and that includes piracy. People do not pirate games because they hate games. They pirate games because they feel shut off from them. When a game is inaccessible either through price or distribution, players are going to go around the wall that's been put up in front of them. Team Cherry didn't build a wall. They did the opposite. By making that game as well crafted as it is and pricing it fairly, they managed to do something insane. They inspired the piracy community to not pirate the game. On top of that, these major pirate sites and forums are actively urging other players to support the actual release. Imagine that, a community that is built around circumventing payment that is now telling its own members to put money down. That is how you know a developer has earned respect. I mean, how is it that not a single one of these developers is talking about all of the benefits from this? The price, the effective shadow drop release, one of the most anticipated games in the history of the industry, and instead of them celebrating it and how it's lifted up the entire indie scene, all they're doing is complaining. Do they not realize that Silksong's launch just put more eyes on indie games, almost more than anything before it? Silksong itself is a tight, healthy 15-hour experience. After riding that high, players are going to go looking for more. That's how it works. I know because it happened to me. Terraria was my gateway drug into indies. I dumped hundreds of hours into it, and when I was done, the first thing that I did was go hunting for more. I tried nearly every survival crafting indie that I could get my hands on. The same thing with Hades. When I found roguelikes, I played it, I loved it, and then I went and immediately grabbed Risk of Rain 2, then Dead Cells, then Slay the Spire. The popularity and the price of those games pulled me deeper and deeper into the scene, and after that, I was hooked. Now indies take up the majority of my playtime. And I would bet good money that that exact same thing is happening right now. Thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of new players that are experiencing Silksong as their first indie game, and when they're done with it, they're likely going to be hungry for more. That's not a threat to the indie scene. That is lifeblood. That is new players being funneled straight into it. This is one of the most hyped indie launches ever. I don't think we've seen anticipation on this level for an independent game like this before. And the best part is its release and its price point just guarantee that momentum is going to continue to spread, just like Expedition 33, just like Schedule 1, Repo, and Peak. Silksong is not stealing oxygen from the indie scene. It's just pumping more of it in. It's renewing interest, it's expanding awareness, and it's broadening the audience. Developers need to be more thankful of the noise that Silksong is making, and they should be even more thankful that it's priced in a way that everybody can join in. But I think the one thing that they should be the most thankful about is the kind of message that this game is sending to the rest of the industry. Eurogamer reported on an interview with Team Cherry in an article titled, "No, Silksong hasn't been in development hell. Hype skyrocketed the sales of the original game to give Cherry financial freedom. It's nice to make fun things." Ed Nightingale, commenting on Hollow Knight's original success, writes, "That 12 million rise in sales of the original Hollow Knight is extraordinary. Somehow, Team Cherry inadvertently created the ultimate hype machine. Hype for the sequel led to sales for the original, which meant that they could take longer in development, which then fed the hype even more due to silence, which then became a meme, which then meant it could take even longer. We're lucky in that regard," said Gibson. "I don't think we ever thought about it that much. Maybe that's a privilege of it." No strict deadlines and a flood of financial income meant that Team Cherry could take its time. It is in stark contrast to so many studios that at the moment are hell-bent on chasing trends and generating cash in the face of rising development costs, which has inevitably resulted in mass layoffs across the industry in the last couple of years. By contrast, Team Cherry has remained lean. What's more, it spent the past 7 years enjoying development. "We've been having fun," said Gibson. "The whole thing is just a vehicle for our creativity. It's nice to make fun things." "We're very fortunate that we have a development method that is so enjoyable," Gibson continued. "Not exactly sure how we stumbled into that. Everything comes together so quickly. You can see results fast. Ideas turn into something that exists in a game almost immediately before your eyes. That's very satisfying, and it allows you to go off on these tangents and meet weird characters because someone offhandedly mentioned a weird character as an idea and the other person laughed, and that was enough." "You're always working on a new idea, new item, new area, new boss," added co-founder William Pellin. "That stuff's so nice. It's just for the sake of completing the game that we're stopping. We could have kept going." Add to that a desire for exceptional polish, and it's easy to see how development could have continued even longer. I think we're always underestimating the amount of time and effort it'll take for us to achieve things, said Gibson. It's also the problem where, because we're having so much fun doing it, it's not like it's taking longer, this is awful, we really need to get past this phase. It's that this is a very enjoyable space to be in. Let's perpetuate this with some new ideas. Now, while everyone, even this article, wants to frame Team Cherry's position as some kind of privilege that's handed down by Hollow Knight, I think it's more important to just pay attention to their actual words. They were already developing Silksong. They were already enjoying themselves. Yes, Hollow Knight's runaway success gave them more financial freedom, but this game was happening either way. They budgeted themselves. They stayed small. They never put themselves in a position where they had to churn out a sequel. This was not $180 million stretched over 7 years with an army of 300 developers. This was 3 developers, a couple of localizers, some QA, and a small porting team. Their biggest motivator wasn't a milestone or a publisher's deadline or a shareholder's call. It was just the fact that they were having fun making a game. That's why it took 7 years. But that's why the game is so good. They took the time because they could and because they wanted to. Now, a lot of voices in the industry are going to say the gamers don't understand how the money works, and it isn't fair to hold anyone to Team Cherry standards, but the standard they've set is not some impossible benchmark. The message they've sent is simple. Let the developers cook. Give them time. Keep these teams small to make them nimble. Keep their budgets lean so that they're sustainable, and then trust that when the game comes out, if it's good, the players are going to be there. And if you think publishers and venture capitalists aren't paying attention, you're kidding yourself. Every single one of these success stories forces them to rethink how they're budgeting their projects, how they're funding these teams, and how they're burning through so much money, because the more examples of these small, sustainable indie teams that are producing these global hits, the harder it is for these guys to defend their bloated, unsustainable development models that are only leading to more layoffs. Look at some of the indie success stories that we've seen over the past decade. Not a single one of these guys are defined by crunch or pressure from their publisher or issues with their publisher. They're defined by passion, by the love of the game, by the love of the players. And if those success stories keep piling up, they're going to set an example that the rest of the industry cannot ignore. And I think that's what Silksong really is. It's just proof that the joy of creation can outlast money, deadlines, and hype. Proof that the players will always show up if the work is actually honest. Proof that the relationship that matters the most is the one that's between the developer and the player. I think that that's been the most common through line when it comes to a lot of these indie successes, is that these guys really are just working on the game that they actually want to make. Like, they love what they're making and they're having so much fun doing it. And more times than not, they are given or giving themselves the time to be able to cook. And if I was an indie studio or developer that was working under a VC or a small publisher or whatever it might be, I would want Silksong to succeed, because I would want that story written all over the place, because it's written in the language that these guys understand, which is money. Because if they start connecting the dots and looking at some of these games and saying, well, hey, if we give these guys the right amount of people on their team, we keep their team small, we give them the right amount of money, we give them the right amount of resources, we have a higher chance of success. If they start looking at pricing and saying, hey, it looks like some of these games, if they're fairly priced, are actually leading to more sales and more money overall because, well, more people are buying it, more people are talking about it, which then leads to more people buying it. But then all of a sudden, we just see a more fair industry across the board for just about everybody. And we could actually start seeing some genuine positive change in the industry. That's why I make these videos. That's the message that I'm trying to send when I make them. That's the entire purpose. I want a more fair environment for developers, and I want better games for players. And I think that those two things are the same. That's what I want. I think that these guys completely underestimate the conversation on pricing. Like, they're so detached from reality when they're talking about it, especially when they're talking about the prices of their games in comparison to Silksong. I mean, we just had Metal Gear. We just had Helldivers 2's update. We just had Path of Exile's update. I wrote down a list here. Borderlands 4, Dying Light, Silent Hill, Final Fantasy Tactics, Ghost of Yotei, Battlefield 6, Pokemon. These are all games that are coming out in weeks or within a month. People do not have the kind of money or time to be buying all of these games. And in a lot of cases, I mean, most of the people that are probably watching this video right now, they only heard maybe one name that they know that they're going to buy. Maybe 2 in some cases. Outside of that, probably not many more. That's the reason why this game is doing so well. That's why it's so successful, is because Team Cherry picked the right price with the right quality, and they just made their game insanely successful in the busiest release schedule and the busiest window of the entire year. That's why they price their game like that. It's called strategy. Professional victims. This industry is in dire need of better leadership, and more than anything, it needs tough love. There are far too many people that are ready and waiting to wipe their tears away. And all it is that the players are the ones that are suffering as a result of it. We're getting worse games, and we're paying more for them. That has to change. I don't know how many times I have to say it. We are the only thing that you need to be thinking about. Nothing else matters. That's how you make money. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. I enjoyed making it. I can't wait to go play more Hollow Knight. If you guys did enjoy the video, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video. The sharing part is actually becoming a little bit more dire. So apparently, because of some recent update that YouTube made, if you guys are an EU viewer, if I use the wrong language, YouTube will just straight up auto-filter my video based on YouTube's auto restrictions and things like that. So if you're using restricted mode, turn it off. If you're not, well, keep an eye out. That's all I have to say. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did enjoy the video, I already said all the things. Stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.
Family, 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 family.